All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, there seems to be a lot of confusion amongst my friends across the political spectrum as they process the defeat of Bernie Sanders and the cementing of power by Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, and Nancy Pelosi. And the debate has raged online as whether they're going to be able to support Joe Biden. And it seems especially fraught after the congressional Democratic leadership did not object to the core outlines of that latest bailout bill. And one of the things Crystal and I have fretted about on the show is that populists in the left and on the right are not working together to push worker-friendly policy in Congress. One of those worker-friendly policies that you've heard me talk a lot about this week is that of Senator Josh Hawley's, which proposes that the government pay 80% of wages for workers throughout businesses that have been forced to close. As I said earlier this week, that proposal is the most economically progressive legislation introduced to date, and it mimics the approach that's been taken by Denmark. It appears, perhaps, that some people have taken notice of that. After Hawley published an op-ed in the Washington Post asking Congress to reconsider his proposal, it was then noticed by Waleed Shahid, the spokesperson for the Justice Democrats, who tweeted, quote, "It's pretty absurd that Democratic leadership still hasn't been able to get behind this simple policy and message." That message is extraordinary. Literally, the spokesperson for the Justice Democrats urging Democratic leadership to get on board with a policy proposed by a GOP populist senator. Now, Waleed later deleted the tweet after I highlighted that dynamic for some reason, probably out of fear for being seen as a Republican collaborationist. But perhaps that's exactly what the country is looking for right now. As we've said on the show so many times when it comes to support for anti-establishment candidates, people don't support them for personality reasons. They do so for policy reasons. And while perhaps Waleed didn't want to stick by it, somebody on the other side of the aisle that you all may know and actually has worker interests at stake noticed. That would be Sarah Nelson, the president of the Association of Flight Attendants. You might recognize her from our show when she supports things like Medicare for All. Now look, is this the beginning of a grand left-right alliance? No! The reason Waleed deleted that tweet, and the reason people on the right don't even want anyone's support from the left necessarily, is that there's so much external and internal distrust that it seems impossible to surmount. But look, we do it every day here on this show. And I hear from many of you all the time you never considered a Republican could sound like me. I hear from my Republican friends and your viewers that they never knew a Democratic socialist like Crystal could ever give us any credit or even the time of day. The real question is what this exposes about the millions of non-ideological Americans who simply want their payroll covered in a time of immense crisis. Yesterday, the unemployment numbers increased to 16.6 million in just a span of 3 weeks. The Federal Reserve is predicting 30% unemployment, and the sheer stakes for American workers and families in both the November election and in the bailout negotiations are so high that perhaps partisan rivalry can't be indulged anymore. And it may be time that we start rethinking what is possible in our political coalitions if a new right and a new left were to unite, maybe in this particular case, because who knows what the future would hold if that were to occur. I mean, that really caught my eye, Crystal. That was the first time I'd ever seen anybody in the progressive left ever say anything nice. Basically backing the Democratic leadership to adopt this particular plan. And I was like, wow, that's big. And of course, when I pointed out, he deleted it. I feel bad for him.
But that tells you everything because, and I see it all the time, obviously, like the kind of crap that I take routinely every day. So I understand why he would delete that tweet. But it tells you everything because they say in the media and all these people, these corporate establishment types, they like loud bipartisanship and how they'd love to have this bipartisan unity and civility, et cetera, but only in this very specific way. And if you dare, like Waleed did, to step out and advocate for bipartisanship in a different way that doesn't fit the ways that they like and feel comfortable with, the sort of Thomas Friedman type unity, then you get absolutely trashed. You get destroyed. You get completely dragged for it in all the polite quarters of society that we're supposed to care so much about. But it tells you everything. They don't actually care about bipartisanship. No, they care about the status quo. That's what they care about.
The reason he had to do it is because there are now two set narratives for both. The right is like the Democrats are holding it hostage for their wish list, right? Because I don't even know what their wish list is.
Salt cap tax.
Yeah, whatever, salt cap tax. Okay. Then the left is like, well, the Republicans are corporate stooges who don't want to help out disadvantaged communities. Now, whether they have anything in their bill that actually helps disadvantaged communities, very up for grabs. And, if everybody agrees we should give $250 billion more to the Paycheck Protection Program, maybe it's time to do that. So you can't go against those. So,
right.
Like Hawley is speaking out of his turn because he is going against the grain of saying we should just give money to the Paycheck Protection Program. Be like, no, this is an unprecedented crisis. We need to pay everybody's salary.
Right.
And then Waleed has to delete his tweet, and other Democrats who go against the grain, then they're looked as, like I said, GOP collaborationists. So
right.
there's no room for any of this actual discussion. Because look, what did Sarah Nelson recognize in the merits of that, saying, Hawley,
right.
we should talk, is she's out there. Look, she's a Democrat. She's been on the show, trashing Trump, talking about Medicare for all. But she wants her workers to get paid.
She, like us, is on team working class.
Yes.
She's not on team blue. She's not on team red. She's on team working class. And so when she sees someone she can work with on the other, she doesn't care.
No.
She doesn't care. She just wants her people to have a paycheck and be able to live and survive and support their families. That's all she cares about. And it's so interesting that Bernie Sanders is advocating for essentially the same proposal. I mean, it goes a little bit further than Hawley, but they're basically aligned in the approach that they want to take. And frankly, I mean, the New York Times has been publishing op-eds advocating for this approach too. So it has a lot of backing on the populist ends, also in the sort of mainstream. And yet it's very uncomfortable for the sort of establishment here in this town who can't follow what other countries have done that has worked successfully, who can't do, what would be in the best interest of workers. So interesting. We interviewed an economist. It's going to run this weekend. You guys should check it out. Who was saying, look, if we spent the money that was in the last bailout bill, if you just put that towards backstopping people's paychecks, so paying the payroll, you could have covered all of it with that money. So like the idea that it's too expensive and you can't do it and we got to bail out this one and that one, et cetera. No, you could have just literally paid the paychecks for all these workers. But that's not what you did because you had to please your corporate masters. You had to throw in this candy cane that's been on your wish list for a while. You had to throw in this one. Let's get a tax break to the real estate developers. All that stuff had to be crammed in with some, crumbs, which look, glad that they did something for workers, but it's wholly inadequate and it doesn't come close to what they've done for big business.
See, and I just keep returning to this, which is that like you said, the things are all in place, but the political dynamics of the toxicity, and this really comes from the establishment of both parties, saying on the right, he's getting tarred as a socialist, all these idiot libertarians on Twitter are like, this is big government. And then, of course, they don't oppose big government in many other cases.
Of course
or they say they do, but they don't actually spend any political capital doing so. You see the left, they're like, oh, what are you talking? I mean, I assume the reason why Waleed had to delete his tweet, the reason why so few people on the progressive left give any credit to the right whatsoever is they're like, oh, they're fascist, racist, KKK, modern Holocaust. I mean, I hear this crap all the time. So there are toxic elements being pushed from both are to the point where neither has a political incentive within their own party to do anything. And that's how they keep everybody divided and away from each other, and being able to accomplish anything. Look, this is a good proposal. There's no reason that it shouldn't be getting lifted up left, right, and even in the center. But the New York Times can never deign to praise Josh Hawley, who's a Republican. Waleed can't go out of his way in order to advocate for the Democratic leadership, advocating for something good because it's coming from a Republican. And everybody gets screwed in the meantime.
Yeah. Kyle actually did a really good video on this, on purity tests, and this idea that this guilt by association thing may be the most destructive element of our politics now. That if you even associate with someone or associate with someone who associates with someone who, has a problematic view, then you're supposed to also be toxic and off limits. And the left does this very clearly, but the right does it as well. I mean, this is something that happens all the way around. So how this would work is Glenn Greenwald goes on Tucker Carlson and we have Glenn Greenwald on the show. Therefore, we're also right. I mean, but the people seriously think that, by the way.
I get it all the time.
I also go on Tucker Carlson, so I'm just immediately disqualified.
I get hit all the time. Why are you working with these? Why do you even deign to listen to them, hang out with them, whatever? And again, I think it's stupid. Because all I actually care about is advocating for a specific set of policy interests. Yes, there's some disagreements, but if there are people who are out there who are working towards the same end of trying to build something new coalitions, then fine, I don't care. And I think it's very destructive instructive and tells you more about what their real priorities are. Because the real priorities of so many of these gatekeepers, so to speak, who are going after Glenn, they don't care that Glenn Greenwald goes on Tucker Carlson or Tulsi Gabbard goes on Tucker Carlson. They hate Glenn Greenwald and Tulsi, and they want to smear them with whatever BS that they possibly can. And that, again, is the issue, is that it's all just about traditional gatekeeping and keeping your center of power, because anybody who's a Dem, you're only allowed to go on MSNBC, which means that MSNBC can control the way that you talk. And same with the right. Anybody who's on the right, they control exactly the way you talk. If you differ from the Rush Limbaugh party line, you're out of step, you're out of the party. And so in both cases, again, who loses? Everybody. What we were just talking about in the previous block, in your radar, the largest group of people in this country who are not voters or who don't vote are non-voters. And there are people who are disproportionately lower middle class and lower class who feel totally left out of the political system, and even more importantly, discourse and media.
And you know what's funny is there's this conversation about how it's very privileged to say, like, I don't see myself in either of those
so they went after you.
Right, that's what they said. I'm privileged. Cenk is privileged. And this is actually Amanda Marcotte, good friend of the show, over at Salon, has a new piece saying Katie and Cenk and I are like Bernie bros and we're privileged, all this stuff, right? But the irony is that actually the people who are most likely to not vote are very much not privileged. They are the people who are hurt the most by the system, don't see themselves represented in any of the choices. They're precisely the people who tune out most regularly for very good and understandable reasons.
There you go. I mean, we see it every single day in our politics, and yet, there's just too much at stake for both sides, so we can't do anything about it.
Next on Rising, corporate America is clamoring for its piece of the pie during the pandemic, and this, of course, has financial experts, well, some of them at least, and the folks that we have on this show very worried. Journalist Matt Taibbi is going to explain how bailouts manipulate financial markets when Rising continues.